Life has a way of changing when you least expect it. One phone call, and suddenly my quiet suburban existence transformed into something entirely different. My sister had been in a terrible car accident. While she recovered in long-term rehabilitation, I became the guardian of her 8-year-old daughter, Lily. The transition was not easy for either of us. I had been living alone for years, my 3-bedroom house in Willow Creek Estates feeling much too big until suddenly it was not big enough. Lily brought with her stuffed animals, colorful backpacks, and the kind of profound sadness no child should ever have to experience. The neighborhood initially seemed perfect for a child in need of stability. Willow Creek Estates boasted tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and a central playground that became Lily's favorite place. I watched her from my kitchen window each afternoon, the swing chains creaking as she pumped her legs higher and higher. For brief moments on that swing set, her smile would return. She would close her eyes against the sun and for a moment forget that her mother was not waiting at home. I should have known that such peace could not last in a place run by Homeowners Association President Margaret Holloway. The neighbors never called her Margaret, though. Behind closed doors and in hushed tones, everyone referred to her simply as Karen. I first encountered her 3 days after Lily moved in. I was planting flowers with my niece when a shadow fell across our garden. "Excuse me, those are not approved plantings for the front beds." The voice was pleasant but rigid, like a steel blade wrapped in velvet. I looked up to see a woman in her 50s with immaculately styled blonde hair. A pearl necklace clicked softly as she shifted her weight, clipboard clutched against her chest. "I am Margaret Holloway, HOA President, and you are violating Section 4, Paragraph 7 of our community guidelines." I stood slowly, brushing dirt from my knees. "These are just some marigolds to brighten things up for my niece." Her plastic smile remained frozen. "We have strict landscaping requirements. Gold and orange tones disrupt our community color palette. You will need to remove them and submit proper paperwork for any changes." She thrust a violation notice toward me. "Welcome to Willow Creek. We pride ourselves on maintaining standards." Lily looked up at me, confusion clear on her small face. I accepted the paper with what I hoped was a gracious nod, though inside I was already questioning what kind of place prohibited flowers. Karen noticed Lily then, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly. "And who might this be? I do not believe I have seen her at our community events." "This is my niece, Lily. She is staying with me while her mother recovers from an accident." Karen made a small sound that might have been sympathy but felt more like assessment. "I see. Well, the neighborhood children usually follow very specific schedules for facility usage. Structure is important." That evening I carefully read through the 87-page HOA rulebook. The regulations seemed endless: specific mailbox heights, approved shutter colors, designated lawn watering days. I wondered how anyone could possibly remember every rule, let alone follow them perfectly. Still, for Lily's sake, I resolved to try. The last thing we needed was conflict. The following week, Karen spotted Lily playing alone on the playground after 6 in the evening. I was watching from the kitchen window when I saw Karen approach the swing set. Even from a distance, I could see Lily's posture stiffen as the woman spoke to her. Minutes later, Lily trudged back to the house, eyes downcast. "She said I cannot play after 6 o'clock, Lily reported quietly. "She said there are designated hours and I was breaking the rules." I scanned the HOA documents again but found nothing about playground hours. The next day, however, a new sign appeared on the gate. "Playground hours, 10 a.m., 6 p.m. strictly enforced." The sign bore the HOA logo and Karen's signature at the bottom. That night, watching Lily press her face against the window glass, staring longingly at the forbidden playground, I felt the first stirrings of what would grow into righteous anger. What should have been paradise for a child in need had somehow become her prison. The violation notices began appearing with alarming frequency. Each one printed on bright yellow paper, slipped into plastic sleeves, and affixed to my front door with surprising precision. The complaints grew increasingly trivial. My garbage bins remained visible from the street for 12 minutes after collection. A 10-minute limit was apparently standard. The wreath on my front door contained unapproved seasonal elements. The welcome mat displayed unauthorized text. Each notice came with potential fines and deadlines for correction. One morning, I discovered a citation because my grass measured 3 1/4 inches tall. The regulation height was 3 inches exactly. I stood in my front yard with a ruler, measuring my own lawn in disbelief, when my neighbor Tom approached cautiously from across the street. "I see you got another one," he said, nodding toward the yellow paper in my hand. "Karen has been making her rounds extra diligently since you moved in with your niece. Does everyone get this kind of attention? This is the 7th notice this month." Tom glanced over his shoulder before lowering his voice. "No, she targets certain people. My cousin visited last summer and parked his commercial truck in my driveway overnight. I have been on her list ever since. The Patels down the street got targeted when they installed security cameras. Karen claimed they violated privacy guidelines, but really she did not want them recording her inspections. That cannot be legal. The HOA is supposed to enforce rules equally. Try proving it. Most people just fall in line rather than fight. Her husband is a lawyer, and she has her little group of board supporters. The rest of us just try to stay under her radar." That evening, I spread dozens of HOA meeting minutes across my kitchen table. The documents revealed a disturbing pattern. Over 8 years, Karen had gradually expanded her authority, adding rules through procedural loopholes and scheduling votes when certain homeowners could not attend. The current board consisted entirely of her close friends, each living on Karen's side of the neighborhood in nearly identical houses with meticulously maintained yards. More neighbors began approaching me discreetly. Barbara from 3 doors down revealed that Karen had once reported her teenage son for skateboarding on the sidewalk, resulting in a police warning about juvenile delinquency. The Martinezes had been fined repeatedly for cooking odors when preparing traditional family meals. Each story followed the same pattern: arbitrary enforcement, intimidation, and eventual compliance. I attempted reasonable communication, sending a polite email requesting clarification on several rules. The response came 2 days later, a form letter directing me to review the complete bylaws and attend the next monthly meeting with any properly submitted questions. When I called the HOA office directly, the secretary informed me that individual concerns were not addressed outside official channels. The situation escalated dramatically when Lily and I returned from grocery shopping to find workers installing a large new sign at the playground entrance. The list of rules had expanded considerably. No unaccompanied children, no playing without advance reservation, no access without resident ID cards, no food or beverages, no running, no loud voices. At the bottom, in bold text, violations result in immediate playground privileges suspension. "But I always play there," Lily said, her voice small. "Where will I go now?" The question broke my heart. Our backyard was too small for proper play equipment, and the nearest public park was miles away. The playground had been her one source of joy, her connection to normalcy in a world turned upside down. That evening I watched through the kitchen window as Karen conducted what appeared to be a patrol of the playground, testing the gate, checking equipment, and making notes on her clipboard. When she spotted me watching, she offered a tight smile and a small, deliberate wave. The message was clear: she knew exactly what she was doing. Later that night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked in a whisper, "What did we do wrong? Why does that lady hate us?" I had no good answer. How could I explain to an 8-year-old the petty tyranny of adult power games? How could I tell her that some people derive satisfaction from controlling others? Instead, I smoothed her hair and promised that somehow things would get better. But as I closed her bedroom door, I wondered if that was a promise I could keep. Our neighborhood, with its perfect lawns and identical mailboxes, was beginning to feel less like a community and more like a prison camp under the watchful eye of a self-appointed warden. The morning of the incident began like many others in our new routine. Lily ate her breakfast silently, eyes occasionally drifting toward the window and the playground beyond. I had an important video conference scheduled for 11 o'clock, a client presentation that could potentially save my struggling graphic design business. With work opportunities limited by my new caregiving responsibilities, I could not afford to lose this account. "Remember, I need absolute quiet during my meeting," I explained to Lily, setting up activities at the dining room table. "Coloring books, your tablet with headphones, and some snacks. The meeting should only last an hour." Lily nodded solemnly, At 8 years old, she had already developed the serious responsibility of children who have experienced trauma. I will be quiet, I promise. The video call began smoothly. My potential client seemed impressed with the initial designs, asking thoughtful questions about implementation timelines. 20 minutes into the presentation, deeply focused on explaining a complex graphic element, I failed to notice the back door slowly opening and closing. Lily, bored with her activities and drawn by the siren song of empty swings visible from our window, had slipped outside. The playground sat empty in the late morning sun. The chains of the swing set creaked rhythmically as Lily pumped her legs, higher and higher, her face tilted toward the sky. For those brief moments she was just a child again, free from worry, free from rules, free from the weight of her mother's absence. The breeze caught her hair and a small smile, so rare these days, played across her face. She did not see Karen approaching until the shadow fell across the sand. Karen stood at the playground entrance, arms crossed over her chest, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "Young lady, can you read the sign? This facility requires adult supervision and advance reservation. You are in violation of at least 3 separate guidelines." Lily's swing slowed as her feet dragged through the sand. "My uncle is working, I was being quiet." Karen strode toward her, clipboard emerging from beneath her arm. "Rules exist for a reason. Safety, liability, community standards. What is your unit number? I will need to document this infraction." "I do not know," Lily answered, her voice growing smaller. "Can I just go home now? I am sorry." "Sorry does not correct the violation." Karen's voice grew sharper. "This is exactly the problem with children today. No accountability, no respect for boundaries or authority." Lily stood from the swing, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, I want to go home." What happened next would forever change our lives in Willow Creek Estates. As Lily attempted to leave the playground, Karen stepped between her and the gate. "No, I think you need to learn about consequences. Since your guardian has clearly failed to instruct you properly, I will have to do so." With deliberate slowness, Karen closed the playground gate and retrieved a padlock from her pocket. The metal clicked shut with finality as she secured the lock through the gate latch. Lily ran to the fence, fingers gripping the chain links. "What are you doing? Let me out!" Panic edged into her voice. "This is a timeout, a lesson in following established protocols." Karen's voice remained calm, almost pleasant. "I will contact your guardian to retrieve you after you have had sufficient time to reflect on your actions. Consider this a teaching moment." Lily began to cry in earnest now, her small body shaking with sobs. "Please let me out. I am scared. I want my uncle." Karen stepped back, clipboard raised, as she began documenting the incident. "Hysterics will not change the situation. Rules must have consequences, or they are merely suggestions." Several neighbors had emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion. They stood at a distance, watching uncomfortably but not intervening. Karen addressed them with practiced authority. "This child was using restricted facilities without supervision or permission. I am implementing appropriate corrective measures as outlined in our community guidelines. Please return to your homes." Lily's sobs grew louder, more desperate. She rattled the fence with small, ineffectual hands. "Help me, somebody help me." One neighbor, Elaine from 2 doors down, approached Karen hesitantly. "Margaret, she is just a child. Perhaps we should call her guardian instead of locking her in." "This is an HOA matter," Karen responded icily. "Unless you wish to receive a complaint for interfering with official business, I suggest you step back." Meanwhile, I remained oblivious, deep in my presentation. The conclusion was going well, the clients asking about next steps and timelines, all positive signs. As I wrapped up the call with promises to send additional materials, my phone began vibrating insistently on the table beside me. 6 missed calls and multiple text messages, all from neighbors I barely knew. The most recent text made my blood run cold. "Emergency. HOA president has locked your niece in the playground. Child hysterical. Come immediately." I bolted from my chair, knocking it backward as I raced through the house and out the front door. I could hear Lily's cries from halfway down the street. Terror and rage propelled me forward as I sprinted toward the playground, toward the sound of my niece's desperate sobs. Nothing in my life had prepared me for what I was about to encounter: a traumatized child imprisoned behind a chain-link fence, and the woman responsible standing calmly by, documenting the infraction as if it were nothing more consequential than an improperly trimmed hedge. My car screeched to a halt at the curb beside the playground, even before I fully stopped. I could see Lily pressed against the fence, her face red and tear-streaked, small fingers gripping the metal diamonds. Karen stood several feet away, her posture rigid and self-righteous as she wrote on her clipboard. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, their expressions a mixture of concern and uncomfortable hesitation. "What is happening here?" I demanded, slamming my car door and rushing toward the playground. "Lily, are you okay?" "Uncle," she sobbed, reaching her arms through the fence toward me. "She locked me in and will not let me out." I turned to Karen, struggling to contain the fury building inside me. "Open this gate immediately." Karen adjusted her pearl necklace before responding, her voice clipped and professional. "Your niece was found using community facilities without supervision, without reservation, and during restricted hours. As clearly outlined in Section 12 of our recreational guidelines, violations require immediate suspension of privileges and guardian notification. She is 8 years old. You locked her in a cage." "This is a secured recreational area, not a cage, and I was about to call you once I completed the proper documentation." Karen gestured to her clipboard. "This is standard protocol for rule violations." The neighbors shifted uncomfortably, several recording the confrontation on their phones. I recognized Tom, Barbara, and the Martinezes among them, all previous targets of Karen's selective enforcement. "There is nothing standard about imprisoning a child. Open the gate now, or I will call the police and report a kidnapping." Karen's smile tightened. "I would advise against making false reports. My husband is prepared to address any legal concerns. As HOA president, I am fully within my rights to secure common areas and enforce established regulations." Lily continued sobbing, her small body shaking. "Uncle, please help me. I am scared." Something primal awakened inside me, a protective instinct that transcended rational thought. I approached the gate, examining the heavy padlock securing the latch. "Where is the key?" "That is HOA property," Karen replied, taking a step back. "The key remains with authorized personnel only. If you damage HOA property, you will be subject to fines and potential legal action." "My niece is not HOA property. Let her out now." "Your niece should have followed the clearly posted rules. This is a valuable life lesson about actions and consequences. The timeout will conclude when I determine she understands the seriousness of her violations." The crowd grew larger. More phones emerged to record the confrontation. I could see the fear in Lily's eyes, the same terrified expression she had worn after the accident when she realized her mother would not be coming home for a very long time. I had promised to keep her safe. I had promised she would never feel that helpless again. My gaze swept the ground around the playground perimeter until I spotted a large landscaping rock, part of the approved aesthetic border that Karen herself had likely mandated. Without hesitation, I picked it up, testing its weight in my hand. "This is your final warning," I stated calmly. "Open the gate or I will open it myself." Karen's eyes widened as she realized my intention. "You would not dare damage community property. That would be vandalism, criminal destruction. I will call the authorities immediately." "Go ahead, call them. Let them see what you have done to a child." The rock felt heavy in my hand as I approached the gate. Lily stepped back, understanding my intention. The neighbors fell silent, phones still recording as I raised the rock over the padlock. "I am officially warning you as HOA president," Karen announced loudly, her voice carrying across the now silent playground. "Any damage to association property will result in immediate fines, potential eviction proceedings, and criminal charges." I looked through the fence at Lily, then back at Karen. "No one imprisons my family." With every ounce of strength, I brought the rock down upon the padlock. The metallic crack echoed through the neighborhood like a gunshot. Again I struck, and again, until the lock mechanism splintered and gave way. The broken padlock dropped to the ground with a dull thud. I pushed the gate open, and Lily ran into my arms, sobbing against my chest. Karen's face contorted with outrage, all pretense of professional composure abandoned. "You have just committed a criminal act. That lock is property of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. You will pay for replacement and damages." I lifted Lily into my arms, her small body still trembling. "Send me the bill." "This is not over," Karen hissed, furiously writing on her clipboard. "The board will hear about this destruction of property. You will receive formal notification of violations and penalties. Your residency status will be reviewed immediately." As I carried Lily away from the playground, the crowd parted silently. Some neighbors nodded subtly in support. Others looked away, unwilling to take sides openly. Karen continued shouting about bylaws, regulations, and consequences, but her voice grew fainter as we walked home. "Am I in trouble?" Lily whispered against my shoulder. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong." I held her tighter, my resolve hardening with each step. "But Karen is, she just does not know it yet." Back at home, I gently set Lily on the couch and wrapped her in a blanket. Her tears had subsided, replaced by quiet hiccups. As I brought her a glass of water, my phone began buzzing with texts and calls from neighbors I had barely spoken to before. Something had shifted in Willow Creek Estates. The dam of fear had cracked, and years of accumulated frustration were about to break free. By evening, video of the cage incident had spread throughout the Willow Creek community chat groups. My phone buzzed constantly with messages of support and outrage. Neighbors I had never spoken with sent detailed accounts of their own experiences with Karen's reign of terror. The Martinez family forwarded copies of violation notices they had received for excessive cooking aromas during family gatherings. The elderly Johnsons shared documentation of fines for their grandson's tricycle being visible on their porch. Each message revealed a pattern of selective enforcement and personal vendettas stretching back years. "We should have stood up to her long ago," Tom told me when he stopped by with a casserole for Lily and me. "Everyone was too afraid of becoming her next target, but what she did today crossed a line that nobody can ignore." That night after Lily fell asleep, exhausted from the ordeal, I began compiling evidence. Spread across my dining table were dozens of testimonials, photographs of inconsistent rule enforcement, and copies of financial statements that several board members had quietly leaked. The HOA records showed troubling discrepancies: expensive administrative lunches at luxury restaurants, office supplies purchased from high-end retailers, and travel expenses for conferences that neighbors confirmed Karen had attended alone with her husband. The most damning evidence came from Barbara, whose son worked in it. He had recovered deleted emails from the HOA server during routine maintenance, revealing Karen's explicit targeting strategy. "The new resident with the child needs to understand our community standards. Aggressive enforcement recommended until compliance is achieved or residency is terminated." Within 48 hours, an emergency HOA meeting was called through a petition process that Karen had never anticipated being used. The community center overflowed with residents, many standing along walls and spilling out into the hallway. Karen arrived with her usual board allies, her composure intact despite the unusual turnout. She attempted to begin with standard procedural matters, but was immediately interrupted. "We move to address the incident involving the unlawful detention of a minor child by the HOA president," announced Tom, standing from his seat near the front. "We have video evidence to present to the community." Karen's face tightened. "That matter involves an ongoing compliance issue and potential legal action. It is not appropriate for open discussion at this time." "Actually," I said, standing to face the crowd, "it is exactly what we need to discuss." I connected my laptop to the projector, and the playground video appeared on the large screen behind the board table. The room fell silent as they watched Karen lock a sobbing child behind a fence, her clinical documentation of the infraction playing out for all to see. When the video ended, I remained standing. This is not an isolated incident. This is the culmination of years of abuse of power. For the next hour, neighbors rose one by one to share their stories. The Patels described how Karen had blocked their security camera installation while approving identical systems for her friends. An elderly resident tearfully recounted being fined for medical equipment visible through her front window. The evidence mounted, years of grievances finally given voice. When I presented the financial records, displaying them on the large screen for all to see, audible gasps filled the room. Line items showed thousands of dollars in unexplained expenses. $175 for office supplies from a high-end clothing retailer, $340 for administrative lunch at an exclusive restaurant, $2,800 for conference accommodations at a beachfront resort where only Karen and her husband had attended. These expenditures were never properly approved by the full board, I explained, and they represent only a fraction of the questionable spending we have uncovered. Throughout the presentation, Karen's expression shifted from confident dismissal to growing alarm. Her usual supporters began distancing themselves physically, moving their chairs slightly away from her at the board table. When she attempted to use her gavel to adjourn the meeting, another board member reached over and took it from her hand. "This meeting will continue," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I think we have significant concerns that need addressing." Karen stood abruptly. "This is a coordinated attack based on manipulated evidence. My attorney will address these slanderous accusations. This meeting is adjourned." She gathered her papers and moved toward the exit. "Actually," called Barbara from the back, "according to Bylaw 17, Section 4, a meeting in progress can only be adjourned by majority vote when emergency matters are under discussion. We still have a quorum, with or without the president." Karen froze at the door, suddenly understanding that her own elaborate rules were being used against her. The community she had ruled through fear had found its collective voice. "We move for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current HOA president," Tom announced firmly. "Seconded," called multiple voices simultaneously. As Karen watched in disbelief, hands rose throughout the room. The secretary, looking both terrified and relieved, counted quickly. "Motion carries 97-3. "This is not over," Karen said, her voice tight with suppressed rage. "The bylaws have specific procedures for removal of officers. You cannot simply vote me out in an emergency meeting." She was right, of course. Karen had crafted the removal procedures herself, creating a labyrinth of requirements nearly impossible to navigate. As she left the community center with her head held high, I knew we had won a battle but not the war. Karen would not relinquish power easily, and she knew the bylaws better than anyone. We needed something more, something she could not procedurally outmaneuver. That night, reviewing the original HOA founding documents that a sympathetic board member had provided, I discovered something that would change everything. 3 days after the emergency meeting, I sat in the office of James Harrington, the attorney who had helped establish Willow Creek Estates 30 years earlier. Spread across his desk were the original HOA documents, not the revised versions that Karen had been using, but the founding papers that established the community's governance structure. "This is quite extraordinary," Harrington said, adjusting his reading glasses as he examined the page I had flagged. "I had forgotten about this particular clause. It was common in developments of that era, though rarely invoked." The clause in question appeared under Alternative Dispute Resolution in the founding documents. In cases where monetary penalties may cause undue hardship, the community may vote to accept a public demonstration of contrition as full settlement of the matter. Such demonstration shall be symbolic in nature and proportional to the offense, designed to restore community harmony rather than impose financial burden. "Is it still legally binding?" I asked. "Karen has revised almost every other aspect of the bylaws." "That is the interesting part," the attorney replied, flipping through additional pages. "This section was designated as a foundational principle that cannot be amended without unanimous consent of all property owners. According to these records, no such vote has ever occurred." A plan began forming in my mind. one that would either force Karen's resignation or subject her to the kind of public accountability she had always avoided. I explained my thinking to the attorney, whose eyebrows rose progressively higher. "It is unorthodox," he admitted, "but technically within the parameters of the clause, the community would need to approve the specific form of contrition." The following week, Karen rejected all calls for her resignation. She had engaged her husband's law firm, which sent threatening letters to everyone who had spoken at the emergency meeting. The board remained deadlocked, with half the members too intimidated to oppose her openly. Karen appeared confident that she had weathered the storm, even scheduling a community reconciliation meeting where she planned to offer a generic apology while retaining her position. What she did not anticipate was the petition circulating quietly through the neighborhood. Based on the original bylaw, residents were proposing an alternative resolution. Karen would make public amends through a specific act of symbolic contrition for imprisoning a child. She would kneel in the community garden and symbolically lick the dirt she had so obsessively controlled through her regulations. The proposal spread rapidly, gathering signatures from even the most cautious homeowners. Many signed with grim satisfaction, recalling years of humiliation at Karen's hands. The alternative was clear. If she refused this public act of contrition, she would face formal oval proceedings, financial audits, and potential legal action for the misused HOA funds we had discovered. The community center was packed beyond capacity for the vote. Karen arrived flanked by her husband and another attorney, her face a mask of indignation. When the proposal was read aloud, she laughed dismissively. "This is absurd and childish. I will not dignify it with a response." Her attorney leaned forward. "This proposal constitutes harassment and public humiliation. My client rejects it categorically." James Harrington rose slowly from his seat, his formal legal demeanor commanding attention. The alternative would be a full forensic audit of HOA finances for the past 8 years, followed by appropriate legal actions for any irregularities discovered. As the community has already voted no confidence in your leadership, such an audit would proceed without your oversight. The color drained from Karen's face as her own attorney whispered urgently in her ear. The financial entanglements we had uncovered represented only a fraction of what a professional audit might reveal. Her husband's expression had shifted from confidence to concern as he performed rapid calculations of potential liability. "The community will now vote," announced the meeting chair, a retired judge who had volunteered to oversee the proceedings. "The proposal requires 2/3 majority to pass." The ballots were distributed, collected, and counted under careful observation. The room remained silent until the judge cleared his throat. The resolution passes with 87% approval. The symbolic act of contrition will take place this Saturday at noon in the community garden, as specified in the proposal. Karen stood abruptly. "This is coercion. I am being publicly humiliated for enforcing rules that everyone agreed to follow." "No," I responded, standing to face her. "This is accountability for locking an 8-year-old child in a cage as a teaching moment. The community has spoken. Saturday at noon, you will kneel in the dirt you have used to control everyone, or you will face the legal consequences of your actions." As Karen and her legal team stormed out, the room erupted in applause. Neighbors embraced, some openly weeping with relief. The years of intimidation were ending. Karen faced an impossible choice: resign and potentially face financial investigation, or submit to public accountability in the most literal sense. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked the question that had been weighing on her. "Is the mean lady going to hurt us again?" I smoothed her hair gently. "No, sweetheart. She is going to learn what happens when you hurt people instead of helping them. Sometimes people who love rules need to experience consequences themselves." Lily considered this with the solemn wisdom children often possess. "Will she have to say sorry to me?" "Yes," I promised. "That is going to be the most important part." Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. The community garden, usually occupied by only a few dedicated hobbyists, had become the focal point of Willow Creek Estates. Residents arrived early, bringing lawn chairs and gathering in a wide circle around the central garden plot. Children played at the edges of the crowd, now free to laugh without fear of violation notices. The atmosphere held the solemn anticipation of a long-awaited reckoning. At precisely 11:55, a black luxury sedan pulled into the parking area. Karen emerged wearing her signature outfit, a perfectly pressed pantsuit, hair styled immaculately, pearl necklace gleaming in the sunlight. Her husband remained in the car, unable or unwilling to witness what would follow. She approached the gathering with her chin raised, attempting to maintain the dignity that had defined her public persona. A path opened through the crowd as she walked toward the garden. I stood waiting with Lily beside me, her small hand gripping mine tightly. The community fell silent as Karen stopped before us, her face a rigid mask of composure. James Harrington stepped forward, officially overseeing the proceedings. "Margaret Holloway, you are here to fulfill the terms of the community resolution regarding your actions on April 14th, when you imprisoned a minor child in the playground area as punishment for rule violations. Do you understand the terms of the resolution?" Karen nodded stiffly. "I am here under protest. This proceeding has no legitimate legal basis." "Your protest is noted," the attorney replied calmly. "Please proceed with the personal apology to the affected child as specified in the resolution." Karen turned toward Lily, who instinctively pressed closer to my side. For a moment, I saw something flicker across Karen's face, perhaps the first recognition of the real human impact of her actions. "I apologize for any distress you experienced," she recited mechanically. "My intentions were to maintain community style." "Dards. Look her in the eyes," I said quietly but firmly. "She has a name, it is Lily, and she was terrified when you locked her in that playground." Something shifted in Karen's expression as she forced herself to meet Lily's gaze. The careful script faltered. For perhaps the first time, she was seeing not a rule violation but a child, a little girl who had already lost so much and who had been traumatized further under her watch. "Lily," she said, her voice slightly less certain,